This second video is also about writing the equation of a line, but pays attention particularly to if your line needs to be parallel or perpendicular to another equation that the question gives you. So our first question that we want to work with today is how to write an equation for a line that goes through a point, 1, 2, and is perpendicular to the line y equals 3x minus 1. Now before you actually write your equation, there are three questions that you should ask yourself. The first question is, what is the slope of the given line? Right? They give you an equation, we can find the slope of it, we need to do that first. So when we look at the equation y equals 3x minus 1, it's already in slope-intercept form. The equation is already solved so that y is by itself. So all we have to do is find the m, right? Y equals mx plus b. So we know that the slope of the equation that they give us in the question is 3. The second thing that we need to ask ourselves is just to reread the question and see if our line is supposed to be parallel or if it's supposed to be perpendicular. So when I glance back through the question, I see that they asked for our line to be perpendicular to the equation that they give us. Then the third question that you need to ask yourself is, what should the slope of the line that I'm supposed to write actually be? So if we remember back to what we learned about parallel and perpendicular lines, we know that perpendicular lines have slopes that are opposite signs, right? If one slope is positive, the other slope has to be negative. And we know that our slopes are supposed to be reciprocals. A quick way to take the reciprocal of a number is, if it's written as a fraction, you can just flip it over. So if I take the slope that we were given, which was 3, and I make it into a fraction, so I put it over 1, the slope of our line should be opposite signs, so instead of positive it should be negative, and it should be the reciprocal of 3 over 1, which is negative 1/3. Once I have that, right, I go all the way back to what we did in the very beginning of the first video, right? I have a point, which is 1, 2. I have a slope, which is negative 1/3, and my job is to write the equation of a line. So we know that we need to find the y-intercept. That's the one piece that we're missing. So to do that, we always start with our slope-intercept formula. So I start with y equals mx plus b. I plug in my y-coordinate of the point that I'm given, which is 2, equals my slope, which is going to be negative 1/3, my x value, which is 1, and then I add b because we haven't yet figured out the y-intercept. So as we go to simplify this, we know that when you multiply a number by 1, it stays the same. So I get 2 equals negative 1/3 plus b. To move the negative 1/3 off of the right-hand side, we're going to add it to both sides. And we reach a problem that we've seen a few times now. We're trying to add a whole number, 2, with a fraction, 1/3. So again, you have two options. You can either change the 1/3 into a decimal, or you can change the 2 into a fraction. So our common denominator is 3. So again, if you want to put 2 over a 3, to get your new numerator, you take 2 and you multiply by 3, and we get 6 over 3. So now we can add our fractions together. We'll get 7 over 3 for our y-intercept. And our job is, once we have the slope and the y-intercept, to write our final equation. So when I plug them back into slope-intercept form, I get y equals negative 1/3 times x plus 7/3. Our second question in this section is to write an equation for the line that goes through the point 3, 4 and is parallel to the line y equals negative 3x plus 4. So again, we want to ask ourselves the same three questions before we actually start. The first question, what is the slope of the line that they give us? So I look at the equation that they already have written for us. Again, it's already in slope-intercept form because the y is by itself. So I know right away that the slope of the line that they have provided for us is negative 3. My second question, right, is our line supposed to be parallel or perpendicular to the line that they give us. So I glance through the question quickly, and I highlight, oh yeah, our line's supposed to be parallel. What do we know about the slopes of parallel lines? We should remember parallel lines have the same slope. That means that the slope of our line also should be -3. So our job is to write the equation of a line that goes through the point 3, 4 and also has the slope of -3. So when we need to find the y-intercept and we don't have a graph, we start with our slope-intercept formula. I write that down so everything stays organized. I'm going to substitute in my y-coordinate, which is 4, equals m, which is -3, times my x-coordinate, which is a +3. Simplifying this equation, I get 4 equals -9 plus b. We need to move the -9 off of the right-hand side by adding it to both sides. And when you add 4 plus 9, you get 13. So now we have our slope is -3, our y-intercept is 13, and we put them together to write our final equation. Y equals -3x plus 13. And then our last example. This question asks us again to write an equation for a line that contains the point 2, -1 and is perpendicular to the line 3y minus 2x equals 1. So again, we want to start with those same 3 questions. Our first question is, what is the slope of the line that they give us? This time, our equation looks a little bit different than it has in the past. It's not in slope-intercept form. So in order to find the slope of the line that they give us, we need to solve for y. The first thing we want to do, right, to get y by itself is we need to move any terms that don't have a y in them off of the left-hand side. That's precisely the 2x. Since the 2x is being subtracted in the question, we're going to add it to both sides to move it over to the right-hand side. That leaves me with a 3y on the left equals 1 plus 2x on the right. We can't combine the 1 and the 2x because they're not like terms, so we leave both of them on the right. My second step to get y by itself is to get rid of that 3. Since the 3 is being multiplied by y, we want to divide to get rid of it. So that leaves me with my final equation. Y equals 1/3 plus 2/3 x. Now that our equation's in slope-intercept form, we can easily identify the slope of the given line to be 2/3. Then we move on to question 2, right? Question 2 says, reread the question and figure out if your line is supposed to be parallel or perpendicular. So if we glance back through the question, we realize that they're asking us to write a perpendicular line. So again, as a review, perpendicular lines have slopes that have opposite signs and are reciprocals. So we need to take 2/3, we need to make it negative, and we need to take the reciprocal. So if we do that, our new slope is going to be -3/2. Fourth step, actually write our equation. So now that we have our slope is -3/2, we use the 1 point that they give us, 2, -1, and we use the 3 pieces of information to solve for our y-intercept b. So again, I'm going to take my y value, which is -1. I'm going to set that equal to my slope, which is -3/2, times my x value, which is 2, plus b. When we multiply with fractions, right, I can make the 2 a fraction by putting it over a 1, and then when I simplify, I'm going to get a -6/2, or we can cross cancel, and you'll see that it ends up just being a -3 plus b. Now we need the b to be by itself on the right-hand side, so we move the -3 by adding it to both sides. And when we do that, we get -1 plus +3 gives us a 2. So our y-intercept is just 2. Last piece is to take our 2 slope and y-intercept, our 2 pieces there, and write them all together for your final equation. So your final answer would be y equals -3/2 x plus 2.